Welcome to Hannity. A nuclear deal with Iran has been reached, but don't expect the foremost state sponsor of terror to change its ways. That, according to President Obama, here is what he said earlier today.
My hope is that, building on this deal, we can continue to have conversations with Iran that incentivize them to behave differently in the region, to be less aggressive, less hostile, more cooperative, to operate the way we expect nations in the international community to behave. But we're not counting on it. So this deal is not contingent on Iran changing its behavior.
Wow. Now, while the president struggles to defend his signature deal, many of America's closest allies in the Middle East, they are attacking this agreement. And right here at home, politicians on both sides of the aisle have been extremely critical of the deal, including 2016 presidential hopeful Donald Trump, who called it terrible. Joining us now is the man himself, 2016 Republican presidential candidate, now #1 in the latest poll with 17%, Donald Trump. Sir, how are you?
Hello, Sean.
Let me start with this deal and just get your initial thoughts on it, because they're the #1 state sponsor of terror. They repeatedly say they're going to destroy Israel. 5 days ago, they were chanting death to Israel, death to the U.S., and burning our flags. What is your thoughts on even sitting down with them?
Well, the whole thing is a disgrace that a deal like this could be signed. We had so many advantages. They're going to become a very, very rich nation. You know, they're getting billions and billions of dollars. We have our inspecting teams, you know, unless you got any time, any place. I mean, that's what you want. You have to have any time, any place. You have to go in there and check. We have to give 28 and 24-day notices. You know, I just look at this deal. It's so ridiculous. And not to mention the fact, which to me is very important, all of the money that they're getting, Sean. But how about the 4 prisoners? Why aren't we getting our 4 prisoners out? Kerry said he didn't want to complicate the negotiation by asking for 4 prisoners. These guys are babies. We have babies. And as you know, they're celebrating in the streets of Iran. They're going wild in the streets of Iran. They made a phenomenal deal. It's just incredible. This is amateur night. I've never seen anything like it.
Let me go to the 4 prisoners you mentioned. Major Garrett asked the president about that today. The president got real testy. Here's how that went down.
Can you tell the country, sir, why you are content with all the fanfare around this deal to leave the conscience of this nation, the strength of this nation unaccounted for in relation to these 4 Americans?
The notion that I'm content as I celebrate with American citizens languishing in Iranian jails? Major, that's nonsense. And you should know better. If the question is why we did not tie the negotiations to their release, think about the logic that that creates. Suddenly Iran realizes, you know what, maybe we can get additional concessions out of the Americans.
Well, we're giving them $150 billion. They continue to spin their centrifuges. They get conventional arms as part of the deal and 24 days notice, and they have to approve any inspections. Wow. We couldn't get the 4 Americans?
Well, the answer, I just hear it now for the first time. That's incredible to think that we would ask for them and they'd get more. Why would they get more? They're getting so much. You just say, if you have the right messenger, I guarantee if I were there, you'd have those prisoners. If I were president, you'd have those prisoners, and they'd be back really, really fast. You remember Ronald Reagan, where they had the hostages, and as soon as he got, you know, once it was obvious that he was in there, they were let go so fast. They had no respect for Jimmy Carter, and they had a lot of respect for Ronald Reagan. So I just think it's incredible. I think his answer is incredible, that it would have opened up the negotiation. It's a simple thing. We want our prisoners back. They're not doing you any good. They're in horrible jails, from what I hear, the worst. And these are 4 people that shouldn't be there in the first place. So, I mean, it's just incredible that he would say something like that. That's such a simple thing to do. And it would have been good for them. You know what? It would have softened the deal, even from their standpoint. They don't want these prisoners. They don't need these prisoners. It's almost like they're taunting us by keeping these prisoners.
What would a President Trump have done differently from the outset, and what would be the parameters of a Trump deal?
Well, as you know, I did read, and oftentimes everybody else is telling me, you know, it's the best book, but I did write The Art of the Deal. And they didn't write and they didn't read it. And I will tell you, it's to me amazing, Sean, because you look at the basics of what they've done and how they've done it. I would have doubled and tripled up the sanctions very easily. I would have waited for them to call us. I would have said, we want the prisoners, by the way, before we even start. They would have given them up in about 10 minutes. And believe me, we would have had a deal that would have been much better. But, you know, what we're doing is just insane. And from everything I read, at the end of the term, they're going to be able to very easily produce nuclear weapons, which is really the worst of all. I'll tell you, this is a terrible deal for us. This is a potentially catastrophic deal for Israel. Israel has to be very nervous about what's going on with Iran right now.
Let me go back to the issue of immigration, which is, I would argue, catapulted you to the top. It's now every single candidate is discussing the issue at length and in detail. As a result of your position, this drug kingpin, El Chapo, has pretty much threatened you and told you to be quiet. What is your response back to him?
You know, what I'm bringing up is much more important than Donald Trump, my life, than, you know, frankly, what I'm doing is so important for the country. First of all, I appreciate your question, the way you worded it, because the truth is we wouldn't even be talking about illegal immigration if it weren't for me. I brought it up. They hammered me, and then they found out they were wrong. And so many people have apologized to me over the last week because, you know, when I made my statement, they didn't read my statement. They read little pieces of my statement and tried to make me look bad. Fortunately, you have some very good reporters, and some of the media was honest. And a lot of people are apologizing to me. I brought up illegal immigration. I talk about Mexico because I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about Mexico is forcing people in that they don't want, and they want us to take care of those people. They want us to put those people in prisons because they don't want. If you remember, many years ago, Cuba, Fidel Castro emptied his jails and sent them to us. Well, in a much more sophisticated way, that's what Mexico is doing also at the border. So, because they don't want the cost. The cost is tremendous. And then you look at what happened with the escape. It's a pretty sad state of affairs. So, had I not brought immigration up, and illegal immigration in particular, you wouldn't be talking about it right now. You wouldn't be asking me the question. And now all of the candidates are trying to jump on. But here's the problem. They're weak and they don't understand what to do. And you have to build a wall, and you have to have very, very strong people there, and you will be able to control it. And I had an idea recently. When they send illegals into our country, we charge Mexico $100,000 for every illegal that crosses that border because it's trouble. I want them to come in, let them be legal. They have to go through a process. And the Hispanics agree with me on that. I love the Mexican people, their spirit and everything else, but they agree. They've worked hard to become legal, and they don't like what's happening at the border where all of these illegals are flowing through.
As you know, Mr. Trump, I was down at the border some dozen times, everywhere from the Rio Grande all the way through San Diego, where there's a drug warehouse, an office building, tunnel that had been built. I was in the tunnel. When I sat through a briefing last year with Governor Perry, the one that President Obama should have been at, I was told that since 2008, 645,000 crimes against Texans alone since 2008. Why are people so resistant to acknowledge what is a simple, you know, unadulterated truth that crimes are happening because our border is not secure? Why do you think there's so much difficulty and controversy in just stating that fact?
Well, first of all, Governor Perry did a terrible job. When he was governor of Texas, he could have done a lot better in terms of securing the border. He did a terrible job. And whether he likes it or doesn't like it, I personally don't care. But the job he did in terms of border security was absolutely terrible. And what I've heard from a lot of people, you know, Mr. Shore has this incredible son who was killed and just horribly killed by an illegal that came in. This unbelievable young guy that was going to go to college on a scholarship, applying to Stanford, and all of this just wiped out. What he told me is that when people hear it's an illegal that's up, they leave him alone. They don't do anything. They were going really after the guy. As soon as they found out he was illegal, our law enforcement didn't want to do anything. They don't want to work the same way. And I'm saying, what is this, a double standard? And the answer is, you actually have a double standard. It's hard to believe. They were going, well, and I've heard this from 5 or 6 other groups. You know, we had a news conference last week with 5 unbelievable families whose children have been were killed by illegals. And they said the same thing. As soon as the government found out they were illegal, it became like, let's sort of leave it alone. They got very, very little cooperation. So you'll have to explain that to your viewers, because why this would happen, it wouldn't happen with me, believe me. And Mexico is... Go ahead.
No, I'm not trying to interrupt you. I want to go to a broader question here, though. And one of your major criticisms of your fellow candidates in the Republican Party is pretty much they're career politicians. They've been timid, weak, and ineffective. When you look at the major issues that our next president will have, getting jobs for Americans, the debt, the deficit, health care, immigration, all education, all of these issues, national security, which is huge. Where are you different? How will you govern differently? In other words, how will you deal with the economy and national security? Go ahead.
Sean, I'm going to bring trade back into the country. Nobody's going to do it like me. In fact, a rival network of yours, I won't mention the name, but they did a very big poll, and I kill everybody, double and triple, on things like trade and economics, anything having to do with financial, bringing jobs back, and leadership. I won on leadership by a long shot. You have to bring trade back in. You have to bring our jobs back from China and so many other places, including, by the way, Mexico. You know, Ford is building a $2.5 billion plant in Mexico right now. Tennessee just lost a big, beautiful auto plant from a German manufacturer, car manufacturer, going to Mexico. It's going to go instead of Tennessee. Tennessee expected to get it. They're not getting it. We need these plants built in the United States. We need the jobs here. And nobody can do that like I can do that. I mean, I understand. That's what I do. That's why when everyone looked at my financials that came out today, they were stunned. You know, I'm a private person.
I wasn't stunned. I knew you were a billionaire. But in all, can you balance our budget? Can you save Social Security? Can you get 50 million Americans in poverty and 46 million Americans on food stamps? Can you get them all jobs? How quickly would you be able to turn that around?
I think very quickly. First of all, I want to save Social Security without the cuts. I'm the only one that can do it, because I'm going to bring the jobs back. I'm going to bring money back. And, you know, one of the things I point out is that you have to have an ability to do that. Jeb Bush is not going to be able to negotiate with China. These guys are killers in China. They take advantage of us with their manipulation of the currency, so many other things. Jeb Bush, Sean, is not going to be able to bring jobs back. That I can tell you right now. I will, and I'll bring them back big league. We will have a great, look at our GDP last quarter was negative. You don't see that. You look at China, where they go up 7 or 8%, and they're like, they consider themselves a failure, which is what happened.
Well, here's my
they
question.
went up 7%. Sean, we went negative. That means we're getting smaller.
Well, that means if we have another quarter of negative growth, that's called a recession. I want to...
And by the way, with more people. Sean, with more people.
Good point.
We're getting smaller, but we have more people.
How, in your consciousness, in your thought process, when you were contemplating this run, you see 93 million Americans out of the labor force, 50 million in poverty, 46 million on food stamps. How important are those people to you? Because, you know, you're a billionaire. I read your financial statement today. How important are those Americans that are struggling and just to survive?
Very important to me. You look at the labor force, it's ridiculous. They look for a job. You know, the statistics are totally, I don't know if they're done for some politician. I don't know when this started. But you look for a job, you can't find one. You give up looking for a job, which people have given up. They're great people. They want to work. They want to make good money, and they can't find a job. They're essentially, for statistical purposes, they're considered employed. So the number doesn't reflect. You know, somebody actually last week said we have a 40% unemployment. So I've been saying 19 to 21%. But somebody actually came out last week and said we have a 40%, and they might very well be right. Our country is suffering. We're going down. We have people that are incompetent doing it. And if you have Hillary Clinton or Jeb Bush, it's going to be more of the same, and we're not going to have a country left anymore.
All right, more with Mr. Trump coming up in just moments. But Welcome back to Hannity. 2016 GOP presidential candidate Donald Trump continues to surge in the polls. According to the latest Washington Post ABC News poll, Mr. Trump's popularity among Republicans has jumped to 57% in July, up from 23% in May. We were talking about the economy earlier. I want to specifically ask, how do you deal with a world where Putin is running roughshod over us? The Chinese are pursuing their territorial ambitions. You got ISIS out there taking territory that Americans fought, bled, and died over. And the Israelis now left out there to hanging out there to dry because this president abandoned them. You become president. Foreign policy. What are your priorities?
Sean, it's about respect. Putin has no respect for President Obama, and Obama doesn't like him much either, in all fairness, but he has no respect for Obama. China is, they're taking our money, they're fleecing us. We owe $1.4 trillion. They're our largest creditor. Individually now, we owe $18 trillion, going up very rapidly. But we owe to China $1.4 trillion. To Japan, we owe $1.3 trillion. Japan sends its cars in here, sells them by the millions, and we owe them money. How does this happen? With China, the same thing. They're devaluing their currency. What's going on is incredible. The problem is we have leaders that don't know what they're doing. And these countries don't respect us anymore, Sean. We need somebody that they're going to respect. And believe me, they will respect me. That I can tell you. I made a lot of money dealing against China. A lot. You'll see that in the statement if you look at it. But I make a lot of money dealing with foreign countries, and they have to respect you. And by the way, I get along with these foreign countries. They have to respect you, Sean.
I'm looking at this poll, and it shows a huge spike. You're now the front runner. You're the leader in the latest poll at 17%. But it shows that you do have, there's a fairly high percentage of people that, when you look at the electorate at large, where people strongly have an unfavorable view of you. And my question is, how do you get them to look at Donald Trump differently, to say, wait a minute, let me tell you what I'm going to do? How do you turn that number around?
Well, I'm leading in all the polls, and those numbers have really gotten a lot better, and people get to understand what I'm doing. A lot of the people, they said 40% of the people think I'm just doing this for fun. This isn't fun. I mean, it's costing me a lot of money. You can have a lot of money. It's still costing me. I lose accounts where Macy's doesn't mind having weak borders. And, Macy's is a disgrace, frankly. I think people shouldn't shop there anymore. It's disgusting. They were very disloyal and, frankly, in so many different ways. NBC, Univision, so many of these companies, and they're weak and they're ineffective people. I don't understand it. But I will tell you, when people see what I want to do for the country, those numbers, and you see them, they've gotten much better. And they'll continue to go up. But a lot of people think I'm just having a good time. This isn't a good time. Speaking with you, I think you're a fantastic guy, Sean, but I don't need to be doing this. This isn't really fun.
Yeah, I got better things to do than hang out. I got better things to do than hang out with Hannity. Great.
Well, I have other things I could be doing. I mean, but I think you see those numbers are getting very good now, and I think pretty soon they're going to be quite good. And look, Hillary was the worst Secretary of State in the history of our country. I'm the only one that's going to beat her, Sean. Nobody else is going to beat her. And she was terrible. And yet I have to go, and we have to, go through this process. And remember this, Jeb Bush will never take us to the promised land. No matter what you do, it's not going to happen.
How bad do you think America, in terms of its shape, you keep talking about making America great again? Well, that means we're not we're not great right now. How bad is it? We lost our #1 seed to China. China now is the big economic engine. We lost our #1 seed to China. And that was unthinkable. If you would have gone back 6, 7, 8 years ago, that was unthinkable. No, we're not. We have infrastructure that's rotting. Sean, I travel all over the world. You go to places like anywhere, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, China, any place, you can name 100, you can name 30 places. You got to see the airports. You got to see the magnificent roads. You have to see the bridges that they have. We're falling apart. Our bridges are falling down. Our infrastructure is falling apart. Then you see hospitals where they spend $2 billion to build a hospital and they can't open it because it doesn't work. Believe me, I could turn this country around so fast, and people would love me for it. That's what they want, and that's why I'm leading in the polls, I think. I'd like to see America great again as well. I'd like to see Americans back to work. I'd like to stop robbing future generations, and I'd like to be tough on the world stage once more. So I agree, we're in tough shape right now. Mr. Trump, good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Coming up.